I was born in New York City, where my mom and dad lived at the time. I had a fairly normal first 6 years of life, but then it became something that I wouldn't call normal and wouldn't wish on any child. You see, when I was 6 years old, my folks died in a plane crash, so I was sent to live with my Uncle John, Aunt Naomi, and Cousin Cara out in California. Uncle John had been stationed at Fort Irwin at the time, so that was where I went. Granted, my life wasn't normal anymore, and I did miss my parents, but Uncle John and Aunt Naomi did their best to make me feel loved. This, even as they struggled with their own grief over my parents' deaths. John Shepard is my father's brother. He and Aunt Naomi had been married about the same time as Mom and Dad were. I vaguely remember my parents telling me that if anything happened to them, I would be living with John and Naomi, my godparents. At 6, I barely remembered my folks. I wondered why my new mom and dad were my aunt and uncle, but after a while, I just accepted it. They had been really broken up over my folks dying, but always treated me like their own son. Cousin Cara became more of a sister to me than a cousin, and Naomi became mom while John became dad. I never questioned why John was white and Naomi was black. In fact, I think that bit of trivia contributed somewhat to my taste in women as I grew older. My name is Declan Shepard, by the way. I've gone by Deck my whole life, though. I'm 33 years old, 6 feet 1 inch, weigh 205 pounds, and I keep in shape. I keep my prematurely graying black hair cut short as I did in the army, but I've been called handsome by most ladies I've dated. My cobalt blue eyes round out my features along with a nose that has been broken in the past. Not too badly, but enough to give my face some character. I was in my share of fights while growing up. Some were because of being the new kid in school, since Uncle John was in the army and we moved around a lot. Some were because I was in a salt and pepper family, especially in the South when Uncle John was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia, and we lived in Columbus. When we moved to Santa Barbara, California after John retired and Cara and I started high school there, we were definitely brother and sister as far as our attitudes toward each other. We loved and hated each other in equal measure. We were the quintessential siblings, rivalries and all. That still didn't stop me from dating some of Cara's cheerleader friends, though. Anyhow, after high school, I joined the army and was sent back to Fort Benning, where I'd spent a couple years of my life growing up. Only this time, it was for basic and AIT. I did a 4-year hitch and was sent to Afghanistan in early '02 as part of an alpha team under the command of Captain Drake. I saw some shit over there that I never thought could possibly exist. Weird shit. Really weird. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Trust me on that. When I reported to Fort Jackson for out-processing, I was recruited while at the bus stop waiting for a ride to the airport. It seemed that the Red River private security firm had done some checking on me and found my skill set to be just what they needed. They were offering 5 times what I'd been making as a sergeant, E5, per month, so I jumped at the chance. Hell, after that 6 months in Afghanistan with a side trip to Israel, I figured that whatever Red River assigned me, it would be a cakewalk by comparison. During my time with Red River, I met and married Cindy Ramirez, a gorgeous woman with nice rack and a hellacious hips. She was from Puerto Rico, originally, and her mother was black. I was smitten. She seemed to be smitten too, and after a few months of dating and a lot of hot sex, we got married. Yep, as you can probably guess, that didn't last too long. When we had time together when I wasn't on assignment, the sex was hot, but we didn't click on other levels. Just over a year after our wedding, she filed for divorce for me but asked for nothing in the settlement. She told me that she was falling in love with another guy, but wanted to do the honorable thing and get a divorce before she went to be with him. I was actually somewhat relieved at that. Hell, who am I kidding? I didn't love her. The sex was awesome, but that was pretty much all we had. Marriages built on only sex don't last, folks. So after discussing it, we had one last night of hot sex, said our goodbyes to each other, and sure enough, the divorce went through relatively painlessly. Sure, I was going to miss the sex, but I was still young and there are plenty of fish in the sea. So I moved on, just taking a FWB every once in a while, no strings attached. Hell, let's not beat around the bush here. I was a merc, so I was gone a lot, sometimes for months at a stretch. No sense in being married if I couldn't be around to take care of her and keep her happy. Besides, since I hadn't really been in love with Cindy, if I did find a lady that I was seriously attracted to as more than a sex buddy, I wanted to make damn sure that she was the one for me. I'd been with Red River for just over 4 years when my team was ordered to destroy a dam along a river in Sierra Leone, so it could be blamed on the rebels. The main problem with that op was that there was a village downriver that would have probably been wiped out if we'd gone through with it. I refused the order, was reminded of the confidentiality agreement I'd signed, and was fired. So was the rest of my team, as none of them went through with the order either. It was for the best. The last year or so of my tenure there, Red River seemed to be getting into some sketchy shit, and I was a half step out the door already when that op came down the pipe and I refused. Contrary to popular belief, Merc, Air private security outfits don't summarily execute those who disobey orders anymore. Not since they got civilized. Now it's just confidentiality paperwork and lawyers. If I spouted off to the press or The Hague, I would be sued into the poorhouse. It didn't matter if the order was of questionable legality, and it would have just been my word against theirs. So I returned to Santa Barbara for a while. I looked for work, but couldn't find any. I was approached by several people with dubious reputations looking for muscle, but I politely turned them down. I'd had more than enough of being a thug. My family had stopped talking to me when I told them that I was working for Red River after I left the army. Since I got fired and told them why, we've started mending our estranged relationship. I moved down to LA and took a part-time bouncer job at a nightclub, but it was barely paying the bills. I still had a decent chunk of the money I made from Red River, but that was still dwindling slowly but steadily. I had to get a real job and fast. I was sitting in the Shamrock one Thursday afternoon when I overheard a conversation that would change my life. I just sat down at the bar and ordered a beer when the two guys' conversation at the table behind me drifted over to where I was sitting. But you have to help me. I need proof that my wife is putting our children in danger when she brings her boyfriend over to the house. She says that if I divorce her, that she'll take me to the cleaners, take my children away from me, and I'll never see them again. He somehow pleaded with the other guy without whining. That was what really caught my attention. His voice, while angry, while begging for help, had no trace of a whine anywhere in there. I had to give myself a wry smile in the mirror. At least Cindy and I never had kids, and she didn't have a lover that I knew of. Anyway, while we were married, she'd been very specific that she hadn't slept with him yet. I kind of counted that as a blessing, and I had decided not to ask questions of her. I was pretty laid back about the whole thing, probably because I figured out that I didn't really love her, more like I lusted her. But now as I grew older, I did want to find a lady I could settle down with. Once I had a full-time job, I clocked them in the mirror to see who they were. The guy who was speaking was a run of a dude, probably 5 feet 6 inches standing on his tiptoes. He was balding and wore glasses. For some reason, accountant was the first thought I came up with to describe him. Mr. Turner, I don't know what to tell you. If she doesn't bring her lover into the house when your children are there and have sexual intercourse with him in front of them, there's no real legal basis for denying her custody in a divorce. This is California, so wives and mothers almost always get preferential treatment as far as division of assets and custody of the children. I guess that he was either a PI or a lawyer. Probably a PI, since he sure didn't look much like a legal eagle. The cheap suit and the bulge of a gun under his suit jacket gave me that impression. I'll pay you $50,000 to get me anything that I can use to have her declared an unfit mother, Turner said. That piqued my interest. $50K isn't a bad chunk of change. Mr. Turner, you've already said that she never brings her lover to the house when your children are there. She sends them to a sitter. That right there tells me that she doesn't put them in the middle of your lifestyle. It's not my lifestyle, Mr. Stone. My wife is forcing this on me, and I basically have no choice, he snarled, his voice rising and starting to draw attention. I sighed. I've always had a soft spot for the underdogs. I never like seeing someone get shit on when they don't deserve it. Blame it on how I was raised. Besides, if I could wrangle that $50K, it would at least be a start. The funds I'd squirreled away from my Red River days were starting to run a bit thin. I started formulating a plan of action immediately. I'm sorry, Mr. Turner. There's nothing that I can do. You already know your wife has a lover, and even with proof of it, she's still going to make your life hell in the divorce. All I can really say is good luck to you. I hate it when cheaters get away with it, but with all the bleeding heart judges in this state, there's no way to prove her an unfit mother, unless she does something illegal or immoral in front of the children, Stone said as he got up to leave. Turner just sat there with his head down as Stone put his hand on the smaller man's shoulder and gave it a squeeze. Then the private eye walked out. That was my cue. I got up and took my beer to the table. Mr. Turner? I asked softly. He looked up at me. Yes? Who are you? He asked, his defenses coming up because I'd caught him crying. My name is Declan Shepard, and I couldn't help overhearing your conversation with the private detective. I know you don't know me and have no reason to trust me, but I believe that I can help you with your problem, I responded with a nod. May I sit down? His face lit up with hope. Please do, Mr. Shepard. He gestured to the chair most recently vacated by the PI. Thank you. I smiled with a nod and sat down. Now, I couldn't help but overhear that your wife has a lover. She has basically backed you into a corner on it, so you can't divorce her without losing pretty much everything. Am I right so far? Yes, pretty much, he said with a defeated snort. I don't see how you can help, though. Are you a private investigator? Not as such, I admitted. But I believe I can help you, just not quite in the way you were thinking. What do you mean, Mr. Shepard? He asked with a puzzled expression. I can level the playing field for you. I can make it so that your wife won't be able to do much when you decide to file for divorce. I need some more information about her and her lover, though. I need to know what you know about him, especially, I said. Turner thought for a few moments. His name is Gordon Smith, and he's even bigger than you are. He's threatened me that if I put up any kind of resistance, he'll beat me or worse, he said, shaking with anger and fear. More anger was apparent, though. My respect for the man jumped another notch. I nodded. Okay, I'm not worried about how big he is, I responded. What does he look like? Big, blonde, and looks a bit like Thor from the movies. He even has the stubble on his face. I got a picture in my head of an evil Chris Hemsworth type of character. Okay, and do you know where he lives? 2 miles over from our house. I followed him once after he left our place. I can't fight him, though. As much as I'd like to beat him to death, I wouldn't stand a chance against him. I tried once, he said as he pulled out a pen and scribbled down the offending a-hole's address on a napkin. Okay, back to your wife for a moment. How long have you two been married? 16 years. 15 of those happily, at least on my part. I thought she was happy too, but then a year ago, he let his voice trail off as he shook his head in disgust. He then finished writing and handed the napkin to me with the address on it. I took it when he held it out to me, and I nodded as I looked at the a-hole's address. Does he have a family? Wife? Children? Not that I could tell. He lives in a nice house in Beverly Hills, though, he said. Okay, so possibly no wife or kids that could be turned against him. Can you tell me exactly how and when this whole mess started? I inquired. He took a deep breath. About a year ago was when everything changed. Candace, my wife, came home one day and said that we needed to talk. I thought that she was going to divorce me right then and there, but she said that she was going to turn me into a cuck, and there was nothing I could do about it. Of course, I threatened to divorce her, and that was when she told me that she would take my kids and leave me a broken wreck if I tried that. So, I got the bright idea to get my baseball bat and beat the a-hole senseless the next time he came over. She told me that he would come over and have sex with her, and she expected me to watch how a real man takes care of business, he said, rolling his eyes. I take it the baseball bat tactic didn't work too well? I raised one eyebrow. I would have laid him out cold, but my loving wife warned him, and he spun around and took the bat from me. He then hit me in the stomach with it, and that was the last time I tried to fight him. He said if I tried something like that again, he would beat me to a bloody pulp. Then he said that if I tried it again after that, he would kill me and that he and my wife would get my life insurance. So, the a-hole was a bully, and one willing to break the law seemingly without a second thought. I could definitely work with that. Knowledge is power, folks. Sun Tzu had it right. Know your enemy. I was going to figure out everything possible about old Gordy boy before I moved on him. I nodded, and then decided to ask about payment. I heard you offer that PI $50K. I'll do it for that, and my way won't involve framing anyone. Would that be acceptable to you? He nodded, his face lighting up with hope. Mr. Shepard, I can pay you half now and half when it's over. Can you tell me how you're going to do it? It's better that you not know, I said sincerely. Mr. Turner, trust me on this. The less you know, the safer we both will be. He looked like he was going to ask again, but thought better of it. Smart man. He swallowed hard from his beer and just nodded. I nodded back. Good. Now, do you have a picture of your wife so I can get a read on her? Sure, he said, pulling out his wallet and handing me a pic. Holy shit, she was gorgeous. Part of me wondered how this guy could score a hottie like her. The pic he gave me was of him, her, and their 2 kids, a boy and a girl. His son looked to be about 10 or 11, and the daughter looked about 13 or 14. Even after having the kids, his wife was still in great shape. Tall, dirty blonde hair, and an air of superiority that showed that she had chosen Mr. Turner because she thought she could dominate him. She was stuck on herself in a big way, and I felt sorry for the kids that had her as a mother. Turner, I could tell, had a will of iron under his bean-counter looks. Unfortunately, while his spirit was that of a lion, he was stuck in the body of a field mouse. He was fighting back in the only way he could. After studying the picture, I handed it back to him. Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. Do you have an aversion to anything happening to the man who has been hanging the horns on you? I pretty much knew the answer already, but I needed confirmation. None whatsoever, he said without hesitation. Very smart man. Good. I'm not going to lie to you. This will take a few hours to prep. Do you have your cell phone on you? I asked, pulling out my own BlackBerry. Right here, he said, pulling his out. I got his number and gave him mine in return. Good to go, I said. I'll text you a few hours before I go after him. Do you have any idea of when he's coming to your house next? Tomorrow night, he said with a look of pure venom. I wish I could just kill the pig. Tempting, but not an option, I said. He won't be so enthusiastic to have sex with your wife when I'm done talking to him, though. I plan to make things a bit difficult for him. Also, can your wife or her lawyer trace the money you're going to use to pay me? I asked. No, it's from a rainy day fund that I set up a year ago when all this started, he said. A friend of mine went through a divorce, so he told me what he did to minimize the damage his wife could do to him. The account is offshore, and nobody knows about it but me. Good deal, I smiled, admiring his forethought on the whole mess. Mr. Turner, what time tomorrow evening is Gordon supposed to be there? I could probably catch him off guard before he left his house if I knew his itinerary. Not sure, but she set it up for tomorrow that I was to take the kids to the sitter around 6 p.m. I smiled. Good to know. When you get home from work tomorrow, break your key off in the ignition. Pull it out halfway, then tug sharply back so it snaps clean. I know, it sounds strange, but we're going to have to make this as difficult for them as possible. He smiled genuinely for the first time. I like it. My wife and the a-hole won't be able to do anything with the kids there, unless she takes them to the sitter herself. She has her own car and never lets anyone else drive it, including me. He was whispering low, so nobody else could hear him. I checked around, and nobody was paying us any attention. After his initial outburst, everyone in the bar went back to minding their own business. Mr. Turner, I have to ask you something. Has your wife been the one in charge during your entire relationship? He looked down for a moment, then back up before answering. Yes, she has. She came on to me, if you can believe it, he chuckled. I nodded. Sir, I think that as soon as this is all over, you should divorce her. Are her parents still alive? Yes, but she said that if I told them or anyone what was going on, I'd never see my kids again, he said with pain in his eyes. I believe she'd do it too. She would probably take them out of the country where I couldn't find them. That isn't going to happen, I promised him. I just hoped I could keep that promise. Then I thought of something that would be very hard to ask. I noticed in the photo of the children that they didn't look much like Turner. They looked more like his wife. That started bugging me, so I went for it and asked the hardest question of the conversation. Mr. Turner, are you 100% certain that your children are actually yours? Please don't take this the wrong way, but with the way your wife has been acting, is it possible that she had an affair and had her lover's children instead? Turner visibly paled at that. He got a haunted look in his eyes that said that he wasn't sure, and now feared the worst. Get a DNA test, Mr. Turner. Make sure. I basically ordered him. If they aren't yours, you might be able to sue for back child support from the actual father. Failing that, you might be able to sue both your wife and her lover for fraud, in that you were led to believe that the kids are yours. If they turn out to be your children, you'll still at least have some parental rights as their father. I broke it to him as gently as I could. I'd actually toyed with the idea of becoming a lawyer at one point, so I'd studied some of the law. I'd sampled several different fields of law, and family law was one of the more convoluted areas. The part one really hated about it was trying to translate legalese into plain English, so I gave it up as a lost cause. He was just shaking his head. I'm sorry, Mr. Shepard. I should be stronger for what I'm going to have to do. I love my kids, and I loved my wife until she started this crap. Sure, she was kind of domineering before, but she was also loving and caring in our relationship. I can kind of understand where you're coming from. My ex-wife traded me in for a richer model. Luckily, I wasn't that in love with her, and I was gone a lot of the time. I realize now that I wasn't ready to get married. I'm hoping that I find the right lady and settle down, but I won't let her run all over me. I see what you're saying, but Candace was my heart and soul. I worshipped her, he said as a tear streaked down his face. And she betrayed you for it. Mr. Turner, in any future relationships you have, don't give in to every little thing she wants, unless it's what you want too. If you feel strongly against something, put your foot down. She'll respect you more for that than just saying yes, dear to everything. I also had a friend that went through a bitter divorce because his wife cheated on him due to lack of respect. He had tried to give her everything, and she'd stabbed him in the back for it. He smiled and nodded. a look of understanding on his face. I see what you're saying, and you're right. Maybe if I'd done that a few years ago, I wouldn't be stuck in this situation right now. Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Okay, Mr. Turner. My name is Declan, by the way. Everyone calls me Deck. Mr. Shepard was my dad. I smiled. Declan, I'm William. Good to meet you. And thank you in advance for helping me, he said, reaching across the table to shake my hand. Oh, and I never got used to nicknames, so I go by William. Good to meet you too, William, and don't thank me until it's over. Now, as to my payment. Of course, I have a bank money order here for $25,000, and it's all yours. You'll get the other half when you finish whatever it is you're planning, as long as my wife can't follow through on her threats. He handed me the money order, and I took it with a nod. It won't be a matter of can't follow through. By the time I'm finished, she won't want to follow through. Oh, do you know where Gordon works? I asked with a raised eyebrow. He doesn't work. He's from old money, or so he says, William said with a sneer. Old money means he's probably going to have security around him at all times. That might be a slight problem, I pondered. He laughed at that. No way. He's so arrogant. He says he's the only security he needs. Okay, this was going to be fun, I thought as I chuckled along with him. Okay, enough of this. Get home and act normal. It might be tempting, but do not gloat when he doesn't show up tomorrow. Act like you have been, and don't give your soon-to-be ex-wife any ammunition to make her believe that you were behind anything. Just remember the key in the ignition trick. Got it? He just nodded with a look of determination on his face. Good. Now, it's Thursday afternoon. Does your wife suspect that you're here? No, she thinks I'm at work as usual. I own my own accounting firm. I came very close to laughing and shouting, yes, I called it, when he said that, but kept my face neutral and restrained myself. It took a supreme effort of will on my part not to laugh. Good deal. Let's get out of here. I nodded and rose to leave. We shook hands one last time and I was out the door. I had the a-hole's name, address, and $25K to deposit in my account. Once the deposit was done, I drove over to Gordon's place and staked it out. He wasn't there yet, but soon a Lamborghini Diablo pulled into the driveway through the wrought iron gate. I was parked across the street from his house and down a ways, so when he gunned it and drove up the driveway and out of sight, I slipped quickly from my car and through the gate before it could close all the way. The house was barely visible from the road, so I made my way through the small forest between the house and street. When I reached the edge closest to the driveway, he was just getting out of his car with a very attractive black woman in a business suit and skirt. She reminded me of Lupita Nyong'o, the Best Supporting Actress Oscar winner. Except this lady wasn't anorexic looking like the actress. Same short natural hairstyle though. Same dark chocolate skin tone too, as well as similar facial features. I caught a bit of their conversation while they were walking from the car to the front door. I told you, Gordon, you are opening yourself up to a lawsuit from Mr. Turner. You should never threaten anyone like that. And if he can get his wife to corroborate what you said to him, you could go to jail. That's what I pay you for, Tabitha. To keep me out of jail. Besides, she knows what's good for her, and she loves me. She won't rat me out, he snarled back at her. She was his lawyer. That explained it. Mr. Smith, you are a client, but I can fire you, she stated as they reached the door. Your activities are becoming more of a hassle than you're worth. If you fire me, I'll make your life a living hell, he barked, turning on her and raising his hand for a backhand slap. That was all I needed to see. Plan be damned. I wasn't about to let this shithead hit her. I jumped up, broke cover, and was running for him at a dead sprint before he even finished pulling his arm back. Tabitha had already backed up a step, but I wasn't about to let him close distance with her and hit her. The surveillance op was officially a bust. His eyes caught me coming at him, and a look of surprise came over his face just before my fist impacted with his nose. The blow staggered him, but he recovered quickly and dropped into a combat stance, shaking the blood and tears from his eyes. That's it, Gordon. You're fired. Tabitha yelled at him as I snapped a kick into his knee, staggering him back a bit more. The air rushed out of him as I slammed my fist into his gut, and the air left him in a wuff. He dropped to one knee, and I turned to Tabitha. Are you okay, ma'am? I asked. Now I am. Thank. Look out, she said / shouted. I ducked reflexively, so his fist only caught the top of my head and grazed me. I stomped on his foot and kept dropping, then spun and came up with an uppercut to the point of his chin. Gordon Smith dropped like a rock, unconscious. Come on, let's get out of here, I said. Where is your car? Back at my office. He He gave me a ride here and promised me a ride back after he gave me some paperwork. I'll give you a ride then. I'm parked across the street. I nodded, and we headed down the driveway before Dip Dunk could regain consciousness. I hit the button inside the inner gatehouse to open the gate, and we were out and gone before he regained consciousness. Once we were in my car, she gave me directions back to her office. Has he ever done that before, Tabitha? I asked as we drove. What? Try and hit me? No, but he's become more and more unstable lately though. He thinks his money can buy his way out of any kind of trouble he gets into. She was shaking her head as she said it. Well, he won't be doing that again, I said with conviction. Who are you, anyway? I know you weren't there just to save my bum, she said with a nervous chuckle. My name is Declan Shepard, and I'm working for a client, I answered her. Are you a PI? She asked. Not as such. I'm helping a man with a problem, and Mr. Smith is central to that problem. Unfortunately, my original plan didn't survive first contact with the enemy. Murphy's Law, of course. Let me guess. William Turner hired you? I can't tell you who my client is, I hedged. I didn't want to give William's name to a seemingly grateful, yet still unknown attorney who until a few minutes ago had been working for the enemy. It's okay, hon. With the way Gordon's been going lately, I was already a half step from firing his Richie Rich bum, she said with a smirk. I just nodded, confirming what she already pretty much knew. I thought so, she said with a genuine smile this time. He can't physically do anything against Gordon, so he hired someone who can. Right. Something like that. I wasn't going to do any lasting physical damage to him, but Mr. Smith left me no choice in the matter. Then something else occurred to me. Do you think he'll file a police complaint against me? Nah, I really doubt it. Even if he did, you were acting in defense of another, and I was his lawyer. I'll back you up if he does, but I can pretty much guarantee right now that he won't. His stupid pride won't let him. He'll come after you himself, first. Honestly, he ain't that damn smart, she said with a small smile and a shake of her head. I smiled back at her as we pulled into her law office parking lot. Williams, Stanton, and Keller was what the plaque said beside the door. It wasn't that big of a place, but it was clean and nicely decorated inside. There were 2 other female lawyers working in there, but they stopped when they saw us come in. Tabby, where's Gordon? The first lady asked. She was a cute brunette with her hair in a pixie cut. He's been fired, Shelley, Tabitha replied. Do me a favor and have his files boxed up and mailed to his residence, please. You got it, Tabs, Shelley replied with a look of relief on her pretty face. Who's this hot hunk of man, Tabby? The other lady asked. I had to chuckle at that. Down girl, Tabitha said. Declan, this is Shelley Stanton and Maggie Keller. Shelley and Maggie, this is Declan Shepard. She introduced me to the brunette and the redhead. Maggie was a hellaciously hot redhead who could probably win a court case on sex appeal alone. She was turning on the flirt full tilt as she looked me up and down like a side of beef. Fortunately for me, Tabitha grabbed my arm and hustled me into her office. Once the door was closed and locked, she turned to me and smiled. Maggie would eat you alive, hon. Trust me on this. She's a tiger shark in the courtroom, and in the bedroom too, from what I've heard. I could handle her, but I'm not really interested in her, to be honest, I smiled. She just nodded and sat in the chair behind her desk. She motioned me to sit on one of the chairs before her, so I did. Declan Shepard, you're a good man, she smiled. Thanks. I try, I flirted back. So, Tabitha? I prefer Tabby with my friends. You count as a friend for saving me from that nut job? She smiled warmly. I heard Maggie call you that. It suits you, I smiled back. Yes, there were definitely signals being passed back and forth between us. Thank you. So what's your story, Declan? She asked eventually. Well, everyone calls me Deck, and why do I have to have a story? I smirked back. She gave me a raised eyebrow look that said she wasn't going to take any shit and wouldn't let up until I told her about my life. So I gave her the short version. Something about her made me want to tell her everything, but we didn't have time for that. Well, my mother and father were killed in a plane crash when I was 6, so I was sent to live with my aunt and uncle. They are my godparents, and my cousin Cara became my sister. Sort of. We were pretty close growing up, but after I left the army and went into private security, my family almost stopped talking to me. It wasn't until after I left Red River that they forgave me. During my time with that outfit, I got married, but she divorced me a year later to trade up. In all honesty, I got tired of being a thug, which we pretty much were after a while. Now I'm living off the cash I made working for them and looking for any job that I can find where I don't have to shoot someone or break their neck. I've been approached by some really shifty characters, but I'm not going back to that life. Unfortunately, My skill set isn't the most peaceful. I paused to see that she was listening intently. Anyway, earlier today, I met Mr. Turner in a bar, listened to his story, and asked some questions. I then offered to help him for what he was going to pay the PI. Before the guy turned him down, I finished. She considered everything I said before replying. Did he want you to do anything illegal? She asked at length. He wanted the PI to basically frame his wife and get her ruled an unfit mother. I saw that wouldn't work too well, so I came up with my own plan. Fortunately, you showed up with the shit stain, and now here we are. I finished as I spread my hands out to indicate her office. Don't you mean unfortunately? She smirked with a little chuckle. No, I can come up with a new plan, but if I hadn't acted, he would have hit you. I don't abide men, and I use that term loosely, that hit women. So you've never hit a woman? She asked with her raised eyebrow again. And God willing, I'll never have to. I shook my head. I wasn't raised that way, and if I ever hit a lady without cause, my aunt would kill me. She nodded with a puzzled expression. The way you say aunt. She started, referring to how I pronounced it aunt instead of aunt. My uncle is white, my aunt is black, and my cousin, their daughter, is biracial. I shrugged. She nodded and smiled. I see. So judging by our earlier back and forth, do you like sisters too? I like beautiful women, and you're one of the most, if not the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. I answered truthfully in a matter-of-fact tone. Flattery will get you nowhere, but I don't think you were flattering me just now, she said with a little half-smile. I was telling you the truth, Tabby. I shrugged. You're gorgeous, and I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't like to take you to dinner, dancing, or whatever you'd like. We'll see. She kept giving me that sexy little half-smile with her full lips. So, you know my story. What's yours? I asked, even as I was putting the final touches on a new plan in my head on what to do about Gordon. It isn't as interesting as yours, hon. I grew up in New Jersey, but moved out here to go to UCLA after a short, failed marriage. Shelley and Maggie were my roomies in college and then law school. We paid our dues as public defenders, and when we had enough cash saved up, we opened this little hole in the wall. We're doing good now, but it was rough going the first couple of years, she said. Why didn't you fire Gordon before this? I asked. I mean, if you knew he was unstable, why keep him around? She sighed and looked down for a moment. His retainer alone was enough to keep this place up and running. I'm a damn good lawyer, Deck. I've managed, so far, to keep him out of prison. Let's just say that if it wasn't for me, he might just be serving 25 to life right now. He killed someone? I asked, both of my eyebrows shooting halfway up my forehead in surprise. I don't know for sure. He always maintained his innocence, and the evidence was all pretty circumstantial. No DNA or fingerprints of his on the murder weapon. The fact that he was having an affair with the victim's wife actually worked in our favor. She ended up being our star witness, telling everyone that he was with her when her husband was killed. Timestamps on the security cameras set up at the motel corroborated their stories. Since there was no DNA evidence linking him to the murder, plus her testimony and the security footage, we won pretty easily, she said with a look of anguish in her eyes. Deck, I almost fired him after that case. Hell, I believed he could have done it. Now, I believe he did hire someone to do it, but double jeopardy is in effect. He can't be tried again for murder. Even if we find the hitman who did it, it would be tough to prove conspiracy. If he did hire a hitman, that means that Turner could be in danger, I said as I fished my phone out of my pocket and called his cell number. This is William Turner, he said, answering his phone. What's going on, Deck? Is it taken care of yet? Not yet. Something came up, but I just wanted to call and warn you that Gordon might try something before I can move on him. Be careful, and if you have a gun, keep it loaded and on you at all times. One moment, please, he said. It was quiet for a couple of minutes before I heard him again. Okay, I had to get out of the room to another part of the house. I told my wife that it was Phil Decker from the work. He goes by Deck too. Now, what's going on? I looked at Tabby before continuing, and she just nodded with a concerned expression on her pretty face. William, I need you to be very careful until I tell you otherwise. I'm sitting in Tabitha Williams' office right now, and she just informed me that Gordon Smith is a very unstable individual. Do you remember anything about a murder trial sometime back involving him as the defendant? I explained. I didn't. I'd been out of the country, most likely. Yes, I remember. It was in all the papers and all over the news, but he was acquitted. That was about 2 years ago now. Do you think he? Tabitha says it's very possible. Gordon might not be quite as stupid as we thought he was. We don't think he did it himself. Most likely, he hired someone. His alibi was rock solid for the time his rival was killed. I understand, he said. Unfortunately, I don't possess any firearms. Candace doesn't want me to have one. She hates guns. That, and she knows that if you had one, you'd never allow them to do what they did, and the balance of power would shift in your favor, I replied. Go out right now, buy one, and wait the 7 days before picking it up. I just hope that by then, we'll be finished and you won't need it. I hope you're right, Deck, he said. William, listen to me. Even if I'm right, you might still need one to defend yourself and your family. From what you've said, and what I've overheard, your wife could pose as much of a danger as Gordon. It sounds like she won't take the change in balance lying down. She could go ballistic, no pun intended. Now, I'm not saying to buy a gun just to murder your wife, but you may need one for self-defense. Also, remember to buy a box of bullets in the right caliber. He chuckled at the last part. I've shot guns before, and I know how to load them. Good to know. I recommend a revolver. A .38 would probably serve you best. Okay, that sounds good, he said. I'll buy one first thing in the morning. I didn't like the first thing in the morning part, but I decided that if all went well, he might not even need it for old Gordy. Okay, but don't forget what I said. Just keep acting normal, and hopefully this will all be over very soon. When I'm done, your wife won't want custody, but even if she does, it probably won't work out the way she plans. If you can pull this off, Deck, I will be forever in your debt, he exclaimed. Nah, you'll just owe me the other $25K, I chuckled. He laughed at that. I'll pay you as soon as you get that gorilla out of my life, and do what you have to do to get Candace not to sue for custody. I'll do my best on both counts, and my best is pretty damn good, I smiled. See you later, William. Okay, goodbye, he said and ended the call. As soon as the call ended, I looked up at Tabby and saw her smiling. It's good to see someone sticking up for the little guy. I've always been a sucker for the underdog, I shrugged. Besides, he offered me $50K to do the job, and I don't leave a job half-finished once I started. We talked for quite a while, getting to know each other. Likes and dislikes, taste in movies, music, food, and other things. We actually had more in common than I thought we would. My new plan to deal with old Gordy had pretty much solidified in my brain, so I was able to devote more attention to the lovely lady I was talking with. We talked until Maggie knocked on Tabby's office door. When I unlocked it and let her in, she and Shelley told Tabby that they were knocking off for the night. I checked my watch, and sure enough, it was after 2200 hours. Oh my lord, Tabby chuckled and blushed. I had no idea it was getting so late. No problem, Tabs, Shelley said. We'll see you tomorrow. She winked at me, and both of them gave us knowing smiles before closing the door and heading out. I think they think we're an item, Tabby said after they left. I wouldn't object to that, I grinned. But not tonight. I have a new plan to deal with your former client. I need to get a few things straightened out first, but it shouldn't take long. Deck, please don't kill him. He might be an a-hole, or even a total psycho, but I can't condone murder. I stood up and took her hand in mine. Tabby, you have my word that I won't kill him. Her touch electrified me. Her hand was soft and supple, and I wasn't even thinking as I brought my lips down and kissed the back of her hand. Oh my, she stammered. A real gentleman? I thought chivalry was dead. Not dead, just not seen very often, I smiled. I won't lie to you, Deck. I can't remember the last time a man kissed my hand. I kissed her hand again. Well, now hopefully you will. She stood from behind her desk and pulled me over to the side as she walked over to meet me. When we were face to face, she reached up with her free hand and pulled me down into a kiss. It wasn't a hungry kiss of pure lust. It was a soft and sensual kiss promising more when we would meet again. Her kiss caused an instant erection, and I had to fight every instinct inside me not to take her right there on her desk. Not until this is all over, Declan, she said softly, as if reading my mind. You're right, I replied, still staring into her dark brown eyes. But when this is over, I'm taking you out to dinner, dancing, maybe some wine, and then who knows? She gave me a sexy smile. I think you know already. I don't want to presume, I replied with a half smile of my own. Then I won't say any more for now. Get Gordon to stay away from Turner, and then we'll have some time for us. Like I said, I promise not to kill him. But when I'm through with him, he's going to wish he'd never been born. She shrugged. Works for me. Now, I hate to kick you out. I understand, I smiled. Oh, can I get your number? Sure, hon. She grinned as she took my phone, programmed her number in, then called her phone with it and saved my number in hers. There. Now we have each other's digits. I'll call you when it's done, Tabby. I promise you." With those words, I leaned down and kissed her soft, full, sensuous lips again. That kiss, like the one before, seemed to last a blissful eternity. I left her with her eyes closed as I turned and walked out of her office. The next morning, I put my new plan into effect. I'd been able to get some good intel on Gordy Boy, and it was time to act on it. A few hours the night before, using Google and Bing to find out everything about his arrest record and court appearances told me most of what I'd already suspected and figured out about him. 1. He was richer than the Pope. Old money didn't begin to describe him. Hell, the son of a witch was giving Bill Gates a run for his money. Literally. 2. He was a narcissist through and through. He took great care with his appearance and used it to devastating effect on his prey. Basically, any married woman he looked at. That brings me to 3. He seemed to target married women exclusively. He had been named as a correspondent in several divorce cases, both in Boston, where he was from originally, and even a couple here in California. He'd also been charged with assault and battery once when a man had come home to find Gordy drilling his wife. He hadn't even had a chance to act before Gordon had jumped up and attacked him. Unfortunately, Gordy had pled out on that one too. 4. Gordon Smith was a druggie. He had several arrests in Boston for possession of cocaine and marijuana. He pled out on several charges, and then he actually wised up and got a good criminal defense attorney. An oxymoron, if I ever heard one, but it fit. 5. He had rarely been turned down, but those times he had failed to seduce a wife, she had been assaulted by person or persons unknown shortly after giving him the brush off. Usually within 2 or 3 days, she would get mugged, but was unable to identify her attacker or attackers. Reading that last part, I figured he had hired some guys to take revenge for him when he felt he couldn't handle it himself. The single attacker was possibly him, while the multiple attackers were probably hired goons. That's how bullies operate. They rarely fight their own battles when they know that someone could take them, or if they even suspect that someone could beat them in a fight. I found it strange that none of the 3 women had been sexually assaulted during their muggings. They had all named him as a man who had propositioned them, but nothing was done about it. Like with the murder trial, Gordon had a rock-solid alibi, and no paper trail to show that he'd had anything to do with the ladies getting mugged. So my initial conclusion about him that he was stupid seemed to be wrong on some levels. He was a cunning a-hole. I had to give him that. He was one of those a-holes that prefers to let others do his dirty work for him. I guessed he paid them in cash, so the money couldn't be traced back to him. I'd met a-holes like him before, mostly in Red River. The main difference was that the guys in Red River tended to fight their own battles instead of hiring outside help. However, the same basic narcissistic bully personality had been evident with all of them. Gordon wasn't just a bully. He was a full-blown coward. He put on a brave facade with his "I'm the only protection I need" garbage, but he refused to fight his own battles unless he was attacked outright and didn't have a chance to run away. My biggest advantage had been that he didn't even know I existed. Now, my advantage was slightly less because he did know of my existence now. Now my biggest advantage was that he still didn't know who I was. This was the time, however, for me to act. Yesterday's misadventure was supposed to just be a quick surveillance op to see what kind of security he had at his house. This new plan would be hampered a bit by the fact that I'd failed to get the necessary intel on his home security system. The good news was that I would be confronting him with something he wouldn't be expecting. It was almost noon, so it was almost time for me to go see old Gordy Boy again. I had just finished my shower when my cell rang. I smiled when I saw Tabby's number, so I answered with, "Hello, beautiful. Deck. I'm glad I caught you. Whatever you're planning as far as dealing with Gordon, you're too late. He's already headed over to Turner's house." "Ah, crap. I should have seen this coming. How do you know this?" I asked. "Turner called me. He got my office number online and called me to let me know that Gordon was on his way. That was 5 minutes ago." She paused, and I thought I heard Maggie's voice in the background. When she came back on, she said, "If you get over there now, you might be able to intercept him." Turner overheard his wife having a conversation with him, so he called me. "Now go." "You don't have to tell me twice," I said. "I'll be there in 5. Sure enough, I was out front of William Turner's house 5 minutes later. I'd grabbed a little something on the way out, and it had taken me a minute to find it, so I was too late to intercept the psycho. His Lamborghini Diablo was already parked out front. The dumb son of a witch hadn't even bothered to lock it. I headed up to the door after checking something on the Italian sports car. I was wondering why he hadn't called me before Tabby. That was strange. My question was answered when I got to his door. I rang the bell and heard some shuffling going on inside the house. When the door opened, it was Mrs. Turner, aka Candace, who answered. "Yes?" she asked with a sneer. I had to admit that she was even more of a knockout in person than in the pictures. "Ma'am, are you Candace Turner, wife of William Turner?" I asked. I was now improvising, since this latest development had shoved Plan B out the window. Mr. Murphy was definitely along for the ride. I was also working on Plan C as we spoke. She rolled her eyes. "For the moment, what has the little shit done now?" "He hired me as his personal bodyguard," I said with an evil smile. "He's given me full authority to defend and protect him in any way I deem necessary to keep him from physical harm. Now, let me in." My tone caught her completely off guard, and she stepped back involuntarily as I stepped forward. As I stepped inside, I saw that Gordy boy had William backed against the wall. He grabbed William by the throat and turned with a, "Who is it, Cand?" But the words stuck in his throat when he recognized me. William, God bless him, said, "Meet my new bodyguard, a-hole, the equalizer. I level the playing field and anyone who messes with my clients," I said as I stalked towards Gordon with a stony expression on my face. The a-hole paled considerably as I moved towards him. He released William and took up a combat stance similar to the one he'd tried to use the day before. I could tell that he had some martial arts training, but that he hadn't stuck with it. He knew just enough to be dangerous to himself more than others. I took a bit of twisted pleasure in the fact that his nose was swollen and was obviously broken from when I'd hit him, and even more twisted pleasure in the fear radiating from him in waves. "Run, you little piggy," I said as I continued to close with him slowly. He didn't need to be told twice. However, he made the mistake of trying to run past me to get out the front door. It was a simple matter to turn my foot sideways and stick it out a bit, and he tripped and fell face first onto the linoleum floor. His hands, which were trying to brace his fall, slipped outward, and his broken nose was all the cushion he had as his face hit the floor. Candace was staring at me in pure terror. The balance of power had shifted dramatically in the space of less than 2 minutes. "Where are your children?" I asked in a calm, conversational tone to William. "And why aren't you at work?" "Ooh," douchebag said as he regained consciousness after only a few seconds, and his hands went to his ruined nose. "They're at school. I would have called you, but my wife interrupted my call to Ms. Williams." "I'm glad she called you for me." He seemed immensely relieved. I nodded. "I'm glad she called me too. Now, since this is your house, would you like Mr. Smith here to be charged with trespassing?" "Yes," he exclaimed. "Then call 911, I said with a nod. Then I turned to Mrs. Turner. "Mrs. Turner, you aren't going to be married to Mr. Turner for much longer. He is going to divorce you." She sneered. "No, he won't. Not if he ever wants to see his children again," she barked. "So, if the judge in your divorce case awards Mr. Turner partial custody, you would defy that and risk contempt of court charges?" I asked, raising my eyebrow. Her attitude was undeterred. "As if they could find me," she rolled her eyes in contempt. "I have enough money to disappear in Europe or Asia to a non-extradition country. My limp-dicked hubby will never see his kids again," she hissed while looking daggers at William. William held firm. "Candace, I'm going to divorce you. End of story. You and your ape there don't scare me anymore." So saying, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The ape in question was rising to his feet unsteadily, and Candace went to grab a towel for his ruined and bloody nose. I took that moment to move over to where Gordon was swaying groggily and leaned in close. "Gordon Smith, I know who you are and where you live. I know how to circumvent your security anytime I want, and I can break your neck before you can scream. If you don't want that to happen to you, you will leave here now and don't come back. Because I guarantee that if you come back, you will most likely end up in jail if the cops arrive in time to stop me. See, unlike you, I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty." I paused for emphasis on what I was going to say next. "Your money can't protect you from me. All the security goons you could hire won't protect you from me. You've obviously had martial arts training, and I took you down twice now without even breaking a sweat. What does that say about my skills?" "Yes, I was using the 'it's not that you suck, I'm just better than you' ploy." He had no answer for that, except to try and staunch the flow of blood from his nose without hurting himself too badly. Like I said before, this was Plan C. Plan A and B had fallen apart, so I was improvising my butt off on this one. Preying on his fear was the only play I had, at least until I could come up with a Plan D. Candace had come back with a towel for her boyfriend's nose, and I backed off enough for her to give it to him. I just looked at him levelly, basically daring him to say anything about my threats. Just then, there was a knock on the door, and William walked over quickly and opened it to 2 uniformed police officers. "Thank you for coming, officers," he said and nodded as he stepped back to let them in. The cops took in the scene for a moment. "Mr. Turner, Which one is the trespasser? Asked Officer Horton, the older of the two. He was looking back and forth between me and Gordon. That's him, William said, pointing at Gordon. You baiter shuth your thrap, you weak little cuck. Gordon shouted / lisped around his swollen lips and ruined nose. He then pointed to me. That athole ruineth my nuth. Mr. Shepherd here is acting as my bodyguard, William said. He then went on to explain the whole situation to the cops, who wrote everything down on their notepads. I'd also like you to remove Candace Turner from the premises, please, William said finally. She is going to be served divorce papers in a few days, and I don't trust her to live here anymore. You can't do that to me, you little shit. Candace screamed. I own your sorry little bum. You'll never see your children again. Ma'am, you need to calm down, Officer John said. He was the younger of the two. The front door was still open, and I glanced outside to see Tabby walking up the driveway with Maggie and Shelley right behind her. William had followed my gaze. My lawyers are here. Good, he said. I looked at him and caught him smiling. He'd finally taken control of the situation, and from Tabby's track record for keeping Gordon the numbnut out of jail, it was a safe bet that Mr. Turner wasn't going to pay much in the way of alimony or child support after the divorce was final and the dust had settled. When they got to the door, Maggie handed a manila envelope to William first, then turned to Candace. Are you Candace Turner, ma'am? Yes, I am. What's this all about? She asked, understanding beginning to dawn. Maggie handed her the second manila envelope. Candace Turner, you've been served, she said with a shark-like grin. She then looked at William. That is your copy of the divorce papers. I took the liberty of filing under adultery on your behalf. I'm no divorce attorney, but Maggie here is one of the best, Tabby said with a shrug at our questioning looks. That's right. Oh, one more thing, Maggie said, pulling a third manila envelope out of her legal satchel. She handed it to Gordon. Gordon Smith, you've been served as a correspondent in the divorce of Mr. William Turner from Mrs. Candace Turner. Okay, how did you guys do this so quickly? I asked with a chuckle as Gordon stood there, struck dumb by the way the events had unfolded. Shelley answered, Well, when we got into the office early this morning, Tabby told us the situation. Maggie drew up some divorce papers in record time, just in case. We did it just to see if we could. It usually takes a day or two, but we did it in just a few hours. Maggie is damn good at her job, Tabby grinned. One reason why I keep her around. Everyone laughed at that, even the cops. Well, Gordon and Candace weren't laughing. The cops arrested Gordon for trespassing and assault and took him downtown. They also ended up arresting Candace for trespassing when she refused to leave the residence. As it turned out, William had owned the house since before he'd even met Candace. It was all in his name, so it wouldn't be in community property during the divorce. As the sole homeowner, he had the right to evict anyone who wasn't welcome there. After the cops had left with Gordon and Candace in cuffs, we all sat down so that Tabby and her girls could explain the situation in detail. We sort of figured you'd need our help, Tabby said. From your call this morning, it was pretty evident that things were coming to a head. So, are we hired? Our rates are reasonable. Hell yes, you're hired, William said with a grin and a relieved chuckle. Okay, now why didn't you call me before you called Tabby? I asked. She had to call me to tell me the situation. I was already planning to call her first, to see if she would handle my divorce. I was already dialing her number when I overheard Candace telling Gordon to come over now. So I finished dialing her number, then asked Ms. Williams to call you, since Candace caught me talking to her. She came and found me after she got off the phone with the a-hole. I told Tabitha to call you right before I hung up and had to deal with the Harridan. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, here, I said, fishing the small pocket recorder out of my pocket. On here is your wife's confession that she would commit custodial interference to keep you from seeing your children in case of divorce. His eyes widened at that. Really? I pressed play. So, if the judge in your divorce case awards Mr. Turner partial custody, you would defy that and risk contempt of court charges? As if they could find me. I have enough money to disappear in Europe or Asia to a non-extradition country. My limp-dicked hubby will never see his kids again. I hit stop. So, would that be admissible in court? I asked the ladies with a raised eyebrow. Should hold up. Mr. Turner, as long as you gave Mr. Shepherd specific instructions to record that on these premises, there isn't anything that your wife can really do about it. She made that statement of her own free will, Maggie said, grinning her shark grin again. William was quick on the uptake. Of course I did, he lied with a smile on his face. I was very specific that Mr. Shepherd could record anything that would help in my divorce from Candace. I understood. I popped open the SD card slot and ejected it. Then I handed it to William. "Mr. Turner, here is the recording you requested." "Thank you, Mr. Shepard," he said, then handed the SD card to Maggie, who put it in a small clear carry case which she then put in with the rest of the divorce paperwork that she would be filing with the judge. I made sure that my exchange with Candace was the only thing on there, as I'd hit start right before I asked the question and stop right after her answer. That had been Plan C, by the way, sort of. I knew I had to improvise, and had grabbed the pocket recorder just in case. I'd been hoping for verbal threats from Gordy Boy against either William, myself, or both of us. But when Candace had given me a wide-open shot with her rant about the kids, I'd taken it. Half-court shot. Nothing but net. No, the threats hadn't started until the cops had gotten there, and they had witnessed the whole thing. "Now I can go purchase that gun," William said. Then he turned to Maggie. "Could you please get a restraining order against my wife and her lover, so they can't come to the house, my business, or the school? I can draw one up in no time and have it to a judge before close of business." She smiled. The red-headed vamp smelled blood, and she was going to bleed those two a-holes dry. I didn't even know Shelley and Maggie that well, but I liked them already. I just prayed that I'd never be in their sights like old Gordy Boy and Candace were. Right then, "So what's next?" William asked to the room at large. Maggie spoke up. "First off, you have some errands to run." She started. She went on to enumerate all the things he would need to get done before close of business. First, he needed to hit the bank and close out the joint account, then put all his money into an account in his name only. Then he would need to head to the kids' school and let the principal know that his wife was not allowed to pick up the children under any circumstances. After that, he would have to cancel and pay off all joint credit cards. I counted myself lucky in that moment that Cindy hadn't wanted anything from me in our divorce. I had no idea that it would be like going into battle in some cases. I saw the strategy immediately. Divorces like this one are like going to war. You want to cut the enemy's supply lines while fortifying your own position. Taking every last dime out of the joint account did both for William. His wife wouldn't have anything to hire an attorney with, and he would be flush with funds to wage his own battle. Another fortification would be the kids' school. With her threats to take the kids and run, he had to act quickly to prevent her from abducting the children. Then the credit card cancellations would really hurt his soon-to-be ex-wife, while solidifying his own position. I had to hand it to Maggie. She knows her shit as far as divorces go. "Come on, Deck," Tabby whispered to me. "Let's leave the divorce experts to their job." I rode with Maggie and Shelley, so my car is back at the office. "Would you take me to lunch? I'm getting hungry." Maggie was going over some of the finer points for William, and Tabby's closeness was getting to me. A big part of me wanted to grab her, kiss her, and do other things to her that we'd both enjoy. "Okay, guys, I'm going to take Tabby here to lunch. Will you all be okay without us for a bit?" I asked. "We should be fine, Han," Maggie said with a genuine smile. "You two lovebirds have fun." We were up and leaving as Maggie was telling William that he would need to change the locks on the house and change the house alarm code and the garage door openers as well. When we got into my '79 Camaro, Tabby looked at me and squeezed my hand. I looked back at her and smiled. "Is there some reason why you're looking at me like that?" I asked with a bemused smirk. "Just wondering why I didn't meet you 10 years ago," she said. "You could have saved me from marrying my a-hole ex." "I remember you telling me that last night," I said. "His fault, I take it?" "Uh-huh." A-hole couldn't keep it in his pants. Gave me a case of the clap before I kicked him to the curb. I made sure our whole church knew about it too. They pretty much ran him out of town on a rail. Anyway, after I got treated, nobody else in town would touch me. So I came out here to Cali, went to college, law school, and the rest you know. And you said your story wasn't very interesting," I chuckled. "That's way more interesting than my divorce from Cindy." "Do you believe in second chances?" she asked. At my questioning look, she said, "No, I don't mean as in giving second chances to cheaters. I don't play that shit. I mean second chances at love." "Good, because I had a girlfriend cheat on me once with my former best friend. I didn't take her back, and the whole school knew she was a 304 by the time my cousin was done with her." "I gotta meet your cousin," she laughed. "Well, she lives up in Santa Barbara close to our folks. My aunt and uncle, that is," I smiled. "To answer your second question, yes, I do believe in second chances at love. I won't lie to you, Tabby. I've been attracted to you since I first saw you chewing out your former client yesterday." "Me too, Deck," she said with a smile. "I have to be honest too. I have dated white guys before, but you put them in the brothers I've dated to shame. You're the best kisser out of all of them." That made me grin. Her statement gave my ego a huge boost. I could feel the signals coming from her. After Cindy, I had promised myself that I wouldn't fall so hard and so fast next time. With Cindy, it had been pretty much pure lust on both of our parts. I couldn't deny the attraction with Tabby, but I didn't want to do all my thinking with my little Johnny this time around. Tabby, please don't take this the wrong way. You are the best kisser I've ever experienced, and right now I would like nothing better than to take you back to either my place or your place and screw you, make love to you, or whichever you prefer. The thing is, I'm still a bit gun-shy about a new relationship, and it kind of scares me that I'm feeling this intense attraction to you. Her smile disappeared for a moment. What are you saying, Deck? I'm saying that I want to take it slow with you. I don't want just a wham, bam, thank you ma'am. I want to date you, get to know you, and make sure these feelings are real. I went on to describe how it had been with Cindy, the whirlwind courtship between assignments, and the fallout when she met a man who made more money than I did. Granted, the divorce from Cindy had been very amicable, since I discovered that I didn't miss her at all after a while, but still. Okay, the sex had been incredible, but that was it. Seeing what was happening to William with what was most likely going to be an all-out war in court made me think. I understand where you're coming from, Han, she smiled. My divorce was pretty hostile. If you want to take it slow, then I'm okay with that. It makes sense for both of us anyway. We shared another smile, and I couldn't resist kissing her again. Where would you like to eat? I asked once we broke the kiss. I know this little place close to the office, she said. I'll tell you where it is. We got to the little diner, and I was impressed. I like a good burger, and Tabby said they had the best burgers in California. Once inside, we ordered our food and talked while we waited. We told each other our favorite types of music. I was a bit surprised to find that she enjoyed country and even some metal, while I admitted to enjoying some R&B along with my metal. I even listened to country sometimes, too. Food-wise, she admitted that Chinese was her favorite, while I told her that I love Italian. Granted, I like Chinese food as well, and she likes Italian too. We ate and talked between mouthfuls, and I realized that I had learned more about her during our conversation last night, and then this one than I had learned about my ex-wife in our year-long marriage. Tabby had been married for 2 years to her ex, a black guy named Thomas. He insisted on being called Thomas, not Tom or Tommy. From the way she described him, I pictured Blair Underwood's character from the movie, Something New. In other words, a complete douchebag. When I mentioned that, she burst out with a melodic laugh. That isn't too far off the mark, she chuckled. I caught him cheating with my best friend, if you want a good cliche. Ouch. I feel lucky that Cindy wasn't cheating on me, that I know of. When she told me that she had met someone else, she made it a point to tell me that she hadn't slept with him yet, but was in love with him. When I found out who he was, I kind of felt sorry for him. I'm pretty sure that if they don't have a prenup in effect, she's going to take him to the cleaners if they get divorced.